Lindsay Sturkey, and welcome to Simple Spiritual Practices. This episode is part of the Summer Replay series featuring some of my favorite episodes and foundational practices. In each episode of this podcast, we'll talk about one tangible practice that will help you know yourself and God better. Most of these practices can be done in 5 minutes or less, so you can easily try it out today. If you are ready to experience real growth in your life, or if you want fresh ideas on how to approach your time with God, this podcast is for you. If we want to grow in our relationship with God, I think one of the most important things that we can do is to develop self-awareness. We need to take the time to reflect on our lives and notice what we see, to know who we are, to figure out why we do what we do, and to notice patterns of thought or behavior and to learn from that. Because if we want to grow and change, we have to start with an awareness of where we are. We have to ask what's working in our lives right now, what's not working, what's life-giving and what's life-draining, in what ways are we connecting with God, and in what ways are we moving away from Him or just kind of doing our own thing. The thing is, life moves pretty quickly. How many times have you gotten to the end of the day or week or month and realized you have no idea how you actually spent your time? So I'm not necessarily talking about time management here, but this is about noticing how we're spending our lives. Are we becoming the person that we truly want to be? Are we making time for what matters? Are we becoming more like Jesus? And are we spending time with Him? If we want to live intentionally, if we don't want to kind of drift through our days without purpose, if we want to grow and change, it will require paying attention to the small moments of our lives. See, a lot of times it's not necessarily about making big life changes. It's more about those small adjustments that we make along the way that will really lead to change that will last. So today I want to talk about a practice called the daily review that will help us take just 5 minutes to reflect on our day and to learn from it so that we can grow, so that we can change. So some of you might do this kind of self-reflection at the end of the year maybe. You might set yearly goals or that kind of thing, and that's a great practice. But what would it look like to build that type of reflection into our regular everyday lives? Instead of getting to the end of the year and wondering where the time went and what actually happened, what if we reflected on our lives more often? So the practice, again, we're going to talk about today, it's called the daily review, and it's simply reviewing your day in the presence of God. You ask God to show you what He wants you to see about your day, both the good moments and the not so good ones. So in this practice, some things we might notice are maybe it's when you had an intense reaction to something. Maybe you felt sudden anger or sadness. Those are the kind of moments that we want to bring into God's presence and see what He might say to us about them. So we reflect on those moments and ask God and ourselves, how could I have responded better? What could I have done differently? And it's not just about noticing the negative, though. We also want to celebrate the good moments to express gratitude for the moments of joy in our days. Because sometimes in the rush of the day, we might miss it. But as we look back over our day, God may bring to mind some moments that help you see that maybe the day was actually better than you thought. So there are a lot of ways that you can approach this practice, but I want to share with you the way that I personally am going to be doing this practice. This practice is actually something I am just now starting to do. I've wanted to do it for a while, and last week I started to do it. So some of the practices I talk about in this podcast are ones that have been helpful to me in the past. Some of them are ones I'm doing now that are helpful to me in my current season, but other practices, like the one I'm going to talk about today, these are ones that I really think would be good for me to do, but I'm not doing them yet, but I want to do them. So as I talk about them here, I'm committing to try them right alongside you and that we will learn together. I've already started doing this the past few days, and so far it's been really helpful, and I'm excited to see how it will continue to help me and hopefully help you as well. So we're going to keep it really simple. It's going to be short. As I've done this practice, I spend no more than 5 minutes doing it, and sometimes it takes me even less. This is a quick daily review. It's not meant to be a long, extended time of reflection. And I want to share with you today a way of doing this that will hopefully be simple and really easy for you to remember. Because it probably feels overwhelming to just start with a blank piece of paper and say, okay, what happened today? So what I'm going to do is give you 4 specific questions to reflect on, and each of those are going to be represented by an arrow: up, down, left, and right. So let's take some time to talk about the exact steps for this practice, what those arrows mean, and how they can help you as you review your day. Here are the steps for doing this practice of a daily review. Step 1 is to decide when you will do your review. So generally, this practice is done at the end of the day. Now, some people do it first thing in the morning and they might review the day before, and that's fine too. Pick the time that feels most helpful and when you think you're more likely to remember what actually happened. And if you're not sure, maybe experiment with it and see which time works better for you. But generally, it's done at the end of the day. So for me, I'm going to do this almost at the very, very end of my day. So usually before I go to sleep, I spend some time reading. So I decided that each night before I read my book, I'm going to take 5 minutes first to do this practice. And since I read pretty much every night, committing to do this practice before I read, I'm hoping will help me remember to do it. I'm actually going to use a small notebook to write down my daily review. And so I'm going to keep it on my nightstand as a reminder. So another idea, maybe you're someone that scrolls on your phone at the end of the day. So maybe before you do that, you do this practice, and maybe picking up your phone kind of at the end of the day as you're winding down, that could almost serve as a reminder that it's time to review your day. You could even do this practice on your phone if you want. You could use the Notes app or something else like that. Or again, you can use a notebook or a sheet of paper. So it really helps to decide exactly when you'll do the practice so you don't forget. So set a reminder on your phone or attach it to another existing habit that you're already doing. Okay, so step 2, when it's time to actually do the daily review, begin by asking God to show you what He wants you to remember about your day. And this is a really crucial step because when we review our day, we do it in God's presence. We do this with Him. We want to see our day through His eyes. Also, the point of this practice is not to obsess over our day, to go back over what we should have done better and fixate on the smallest little detail of what we did or said. So asking God to show us what He sees will help us from going to that place of regret or anxiety about our day. That's not what the point of this practice is. So what I do is I begin my time with this simple prayer: God, help me remember my day the way you want me to see it. And you might be surprised by what God brings to mind or by how you see your day as you look back. Remember, this is a practice to do with God, so invite Him to speak and remember that He is with you. So step number 3 is where we're actually going to start writing some things down. So step 3 is draw 4 arrows, up, down, left, and right, and leave some space between each one. So in this practice, I really would encourage you to actually write down your responses. Keep it short and simple. Just write a phrase or a sentence for each of the 4 questions. This is not like journaling. You just want to kind of write down a couple things as they come to mind. So what I do in my notebook, I write down the date, and then I draw 4 arrows, leaving a couple of lines of space for each one: up, down, left, right. And I'll actually share a picture of what this looks like on social media this week. So if you want a better visual of that, or you can use, I've made a worksheet for you for this practice, and I'll talk about that later in the episode. So step number 4, after you've drawn your arrows, is to write down one thing that comes to mind for each arrow. Now, the reason I decided to use the symbols of arrows for this review is I wanted to create a really simple way to remember the questions and to record your one-line answers. Again, we don't want to start with a blank sheet of paper and just say, what happened today? We kind of want a little bit of direction to get us started. Okay, so here are the questions that go along with each arrow, and these are what you will use as a guide to reflect on your day. And don't worry about writing these down. I have these in the show notes, or you can get it in an email as well. So for the up arrow, you're going to ask, what was my high for today? When did I feel most like myself or most alive? For the down arrow, the question is, what was the low for today? When did I feel least like myself? So the left arrow, the question is, when was I moving away from God? When did God feel distant? For the right arrow, in what ways did I move towards God? When did God feel close? Okay, so I want, as you're doing this, resist the urge to write down everything about your day. Just write down the first thing that comes to mind for each question that goes along with that arrow. So if you're having trouble thinking of things, there's a couple things that you might try. You could try playing your day back, kind of like a movie in your head on fast forward. Just kind of think through your day. Start with getting out of bed up to the present moment and almost observe your day as it goes by. Think of all the things you did, maybe the appointments you had or what was on your schedule or on your to-do list. Just kind of go back through your day in that way. Another thing you might do is think of those moments when you had a strong emotional reaction to something. Maybe when you felt sad or angry or excited. That might be something to pay attention to. Those are just ideas if you get stuck. Remember to ask God to remind you of what He wants you to see and just write down the first thing that comes to mind. And if you can't think of anything, that's totally fine. Don't spend too much time racking your brain. You don't have to write something down for each arrow, so it's okay if you can't think of anything. Step number 5 is to look over what you wrote and ask God if there's anything He wants you to see or know. So just for a moment, simply listen to what God might have to say to you about one of the moments of your day. And this is really important. I want you to remember that this is not about beating ourselves up for the ways that we fell short today. This is about celebrating what went well, noticing what could have gone better, and then giving it all to God and asking Him to help us. And this step is where we learn and grow as we notice these things. So for example, for the down arrow, that low point in the day, there have been a couple of times when my low had to do with how I responded to one of my kids. So as I consider that, I don't beat myself up or dwell on how I fell short, but maybe I do think about, okay, how could I respond next time? Or maybe I noticed that my high point of the day was when I went for a walk. I recognized how life-giving that was for me, or maybe that I felt really connected to God when I did that. So then I might think about, okay, how can I build more of that into my day? So the result of this daily review is that we learn from it, and that can change how we approach the next day. So the final step, number 6, and this is so important, is that you close with a prayer of surrender, knowing that tomorrow is a chance to begin again. And that's kind of based on this quote from Saint Benedict that says, always we begin again. And I love that because it's such a reminder that every day is a fresh start. One of the reasons I love this practice is it allows us to name the truth about our day, give it to God, and then begin again tomorrow, recognizing that God's mercies are new every morning. So I wrote out a prayer just as an example of how you might close your time. I'll include it in the show notes and practice guide for this week, so feel free to use it if you want, or just come up with your own. There's no one right way to do this, but this is just an example of how you might close your time. So I'm going to read it now, and you can even pray it now with me if you want. And here it is. God, I thank you for the good moments of my day, and I receive your grace and mercy for the low points. I pray that tomorrow you will give me the strength and courage to show up in my day with others as my full, true self in Jesus. I thank you that you were with me today, even in the moments when I didn't even feel you there. I pray that tomorrow I will be aware of your constant love and presence. Thank you that tomorrow is a chance to begin again and receive fresh mercy and grace to start a new day. Amen. I don't want to spend my life drifting through my days. I don't want to look back and wonder, what did I even do with my life? How did I get here? I want to make it a practice to pay attention to my life, which means noticing the small moments of my days, both the good and the bad, the joyful and the hard, and notice how God has been with me through all of it. I believe that this practice of the daily review can help us do that. So I would challenge you to try this practice every day for a week just to see if it might be helpful. And if you miss a day, no big deal. Remember, always we begin again. Just pick back up where you left off. I've created a guide for this practice that includes everything we talked about today. I have the arrows and the questions that go along with them, the steps for the practice, that example prayer at the end. I have those steps in the show notes, or you can sign up to receive an email with a free PDF guide that you can either save or print out, and I have the link to get that in the show notes as well. Also, just for this week's practice, I'm making a printable weekly worksheet that you can use as you do this practice. It has the arrows, the questions, and space right on the worksheet to write down your responses. So you can print that out, and then you'll have the steps, the questions, and you'll be able to actually do the practice all in one place, kind of as a template for you to use. And I just want to remind you that even though we spent a lot of time today talking through how to approach this and ideas for how to do it, it really is a short practice. Again, it's a quick review of the day, not a long drawn out time of reflection. And I'm hoping that the guide and the worksheet that I've made for you can really help guide you through the practice with reminders of exactly what to do. So if you try this practice, let me know how it goes. I'll be talking about my own experience with it on social media this week, so you can kind of comment there and tell me how it's going, or you can always send me a message and let me know how it's been for you or ask any questions that you might have. I hope that you'll join me in this simple daily practice of reviewing your day in the presence of God, and that it will help you discover steady and sustainable growth over time as you make small adjustments along the way. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Simple Spiritual Practices. If you want to download a free toolkit of 5-minute practices or find other resources to help you take next steps, visit lindsaysturkey.com/free. This podcast is part of the New Hope Podcast Network, and production is done by Darren Hansen. You can check out all the podcasts on the network by visiting newhopechurch.cc/listen. Make sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode in our summer replay series, and we'll be back with new episodes this fall.